Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me. I am Nikki S. Salas, your spiritual guide, well-being educator, and host of the Heal Spot podcast. Today, we have another special guest. This is Chris Tompkins. I call him Road Trip to Love so much. This is uh, Tompkins. Am I saying that right, Chris? Am I saying
Tompkins,
Tompkins? I'm
close.
sorry.
Yes.
I'm
Oh, it's
sorry.
okay.
I'm
Totally
sorry.
okay. No
I don't want
worries.
to mess up nobody's name because it means something. He is a therapist. He is a writer for Psychology Today as well as others. He is a TED Talk presenter, and he is the author of his new book that is not only teaching others on how to be allies, but to help people to heal. And
Mm,
without further ado, because he's going to talk about it, he's going to
mm,
tell us about all the beautiful things that he is doing on his road trip to love.
mm.
Mr. Chris,
Yeah.
is that okay to say? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no,
Okay, okay,
Chris
okay.
is, yeah. Thank you, Nikki. No, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me. I love the name of your show.
Oh, thank you, thank
Yeah.
you. I think it's important. It's always important. To help others on in their process, on their journey.
Mm,
I know this is not only for me to talk to others, but it's still a healing process for me of
yes.
all the different things I have went through in my life. So that's why I love for people to come on and share their
Yeah.
stories to help people along
Yeah.
the way.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes. So
100%. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
tell us about the book.
Yeah, okay. Well, the book is called Raising LGBTQ Allies, A Parent's Guide to Changing the Messages from the Playground. And it was recently released in Spanish. So
Mm.
the Spanish version is Por una infancia aliada,
Oh,
LGBTQI plus, una guía para cambiar los mensajes del patio.
oh, your
Uh,
Spanish is great.
yeah, thank
And I
you.
and I
Yeah.
took it in college, and yeah, I'm still working on that.
Yeah. No, I love that's one of my other passions is Spanish. I lived in Mexico when I was in my 20s for
Oh,
2 years, so I've been kind of
okay,
speaking it. Yeah.
okay.
Um, yeah, the book really, gosh, where do I begin? It started my own journey. You kind of talked about, I mean, the whole, conversation today around healing. It was really through the process of my own healing
Mm,
that people, I think, in my own experience of writing a book, on one level it's about a specific subject or a particular subject matter, and on another level it was all the things that contributed to my own healing, that I was able to even get to the place to write what I wrote.
mm,
I truly believe, and this is kind of the foundation of everything I do, all the work I do, is that we can only take others as far as we've gone ourselves.
mm, mm.
And so all the healing work that I had done in my life, and I'm not done, for sure. I'm a human, and so I think as long as I'm here, I'll be continuing to work on myself.
Yes.
But it was the healing work that I had done that enabled me to be in a place where I could write about the things that I wrote about. Had I not done that work, I wouldn't have even had the capacity or even the awareness to see the things that I saw. I wrote a book that very much came from my own experience, in my family.
Okay.
Um, I it was kind of inspired by a question really that my nephew had asked me at a family function.
Oh, yeah, I saw that TikTok on there, but please
Yeah,
tell.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So for the listeners who haven't, I grew up in a religious family. Religion I learned from a very young age, and which was, I think for I like to share this a lot, but I think that when it comes to healing, multiple things can be true simultaneously. And so
Mm,
I grew up in a family where there was a lot of love.
mm,
And I had a wonderful, experience as a kid, and there was a lot of pain.
okay.
I knew that I was gay from a young age, and so sort of reconciling what that meant with religion, growing up. And so I learned that I wasn't okay. And so I
Okay.
I tried to kind of be the best kid I could be, and was really hyper vigilant growing up. And so fast forward, I had come out of the closet. I mentioned a little bit ago, I lived in Mexico. I actually came out while I was in Mexico.
Okay.
And that sort of inspired the work
Mm.
that I started doing around advocacy. And so when I was in town, I live in California, my family's in Arizona, and I was in town visiting, and my nephew, who was 6 years old at the time, asked me if a woman at a family function who was my childhood friend, if she was my girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I always think, whenever I talk to families, when kids are asking questions, it's kind of an indicator of what they're learning. So
Mm-hmm.
I kind of, it wasn't even so much his question, but it was sort of my family's response,
Mm.
and what I started to think about the conversations that they weren't having,
Mm. Mm.
which is what I talk a lot about in the book.
Mm-hmm.
The things that we don't say, and
Mm. That
and
I still saying.
that we're still saying, yeah, 100%.
Uh-huh.
Not communicating is still communicating, and so
Mm-hmm.
that sort of propelled me on this path of uncovering the nuances of homophobia, and even that word. I sometimes try to help others. I work in the mental health field, and so when it comes to like mental health conditions, there's what's called the DSM-5, and that's what we use to sort of diagnose mental health disorders like depression, anxiety. You meet criteria. There's
Mm-hmm.
criteria in the DSM-5 to meet that criteria, and so phobia is a diagnosable mental health condition, and you meet criteria. You need to meet criteria. And so when it comes to words like homophobia, transphobia, it's not that we have a diagnosable mental health condition that you meet criteria. It's more about the misguided beliefs
Mm.
that we have about particular groups of people,
Mm.
or things in general. And so, my family, because I share that because my family wouldn't have thought of themselves as homophobic.
Okay.
I had, been out my nephew's entire life. He was 6. I moved out to California to work for a national LGBTQ organization. But what I realized is the nuances around talking to children about certain things like gender,
Okay.
sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that I was gay ironically, when I was 6, is
Mm-hmm.
when I first had that awareness. And so my book really, cross out LGBTQ, and it's
Mm.
it's really about, talking to kids, really helping create an environment at home where children feel safe to talk
Mm-hmm.
to their families, even if it's uncomfortable, really giving them the opportunity to embrace all the things that exist in the world,
Yes. Yes.
and to be able to have the capacity to explore and ask questions, and and have those authentic conversations.
Like even in the beginning when I asked you, is that okay? And that's automatic still in me,
Mm,
even if
mm,
I've taken different classes to raise my awareness on the LGBTQ
mm,
community,
mhm,
because
mhm,
like just like your beautiful name, A Road Trip to Love, I want to learn how
mm,
to love everybody, right?
mm, mhm,
So I take these classes, and some of them were mandatory when I was a nurse back in Chicago public schools. But then, even in that, I was like, this should be mandatory for everybody, where we
mm.
are learning ways and how to communicate with other people, learning ways on opening ourselves up to loving everybody, because
Yeah,
that's the biggest message that we're missing down here.
yeah,
I feel that it is my knowing that the
mm,
situations that go on down here on this planet is
mm,
because it's absent of love. So with you even, um, yeah, it came through a book,
mm,
right? Teaching um others and their family, and I'm glad that you included them. It's not because it's for everybody, right? When we have these uncomfortable conversations, they're needed because it's part of the healing. You know, it makes me think of if you get a splinter and over time it becomes, you know, embedded in your finger, depending on where it is, and it becomes normal. And when it's time to take it out, it's hurt, but it still wasn't supposed to be there.
Right,
it's still you know, if we become so accustomed to doing things and we call them normal, that's what I want to say. But when it's time to pull it out, you know, hey, we're about to have this conversation about this, that, and another. And I'm here to tell you, as you know, growing up in a religious Baptist Christian family as well, having any kind of conversation was uncomfortable. And a lot of those conversations just wasn't had because people didn't want to, you know, pull out their splinters. Like, nah, they just, you know, just let it just let it just sit up in there. And that's important. That's one of the reasons why I wanted us to conversate and you to share, because you are helping me, and it is my hope that you are helping. Well, I know you are helping others, but this audience, and teach them the importance of being a ally, of being and just in love, period, right? And that is part of healing for everybody. Like you said, you're human, I'm human, we all are still in recovery. We still on this path from something. So in order for us to get that message, really what the divine is trying to teach us, it's to have these conversations, you know, to see these situations and say, okay, I'm feeling this way about this, it's uncomfortable to me, then question that. Why do you feel uncomfortable about having a conversation about sex, sexuality, identity, finances? Because that's an uncomfortable conversation for a lot as well. We can't heal if we're not bringing out the truth. When Chris, when I would work in clinics, doctor office, and you know, patients come in and we're doing the breakdown, you know, and I'm putting in the different things, history, right? And you ask them, hey, you know, this, that, you know, whether it be smoking or the medications are you taking, you know, and depending on which office, like even the OBGYN, we would ask, and I know it's uncomfortable, you know, how many partners have you had it? And it is, and really it's a no judgment. It's we need this information so we can better help you. But yes, it's uncomfortable to share that with somebody that's new. But sometimes we have to ask ourselves, why am I not even having this conversation with myself? So when a doctor comes in, and the doctor can only help you to your healing from the information that you're willing to give. So, but the more we hide stuff, we're blocking us from healing, and we're blocking us from, you know, just being better.
No. Oh my gosh, you said so many wonderful things that I 100% agree with. And I think it even goes back to, you know, what I mentioned earlier, the foundation is that we can only take others as far as we've gone ourselves. And that's true, what you just named about money, about sex, sexuality, addiction. I mean, so there were so many things. I used to teach social emotional learning for 6 years throughout Los Angeles County, and it was it was a wonderful experience. And one of my it was the curriculum was each class was sort of designed to help young people identify their emotions and discover their purpose and learn really to be authentic to themselves. And the first class that we taught, it's my favorite class, it's called Who Am I? And each young person, each youth was given a workbook, and they would, on one page, it was, what do I believe about money? What do I believe about school? What do I believe about success? What do I believe about, just a bunch of, you know, what do I believe about? And then we invited, the whole class was really to ask them, you know, well, write down what you believe about these things. And the sort of workshop that the class invited was to identify what beliefs they have that are negative. And then the idea is that we get to circle the negative beliefs and then create an empowerment statement, something that they could.
Ooh.
Yeah, so it's a really, really, wonderful class, fun class. But what was so interesting to me is that I taught that class for 6 years throughout Los Angeles County at after school programs, high schools, I mean, various communities. And what I found was that no matter where I went, there were certain things that no matter how old the youth were, they would say about, and I would always invite like a conversation. So I would ask them, what people wrote about money as an example.
Okay.
Because I feel like everyone has a belief about money and it's usually pretty charged. And so, I write about this in my book where it was so interesting to me that, here I am like 3 decades older than these young people, and yet I'm hearing the
Yeah.
same, yeah, and I'm hearing the same things that I heard as a kid about
Ah.
certain, things like
Mm-hmm.
money or success or. And so what I realized is that, kind of to your point about the splinter, which I thought was a beautiful analogy, is that we absorb all of these messages. I call them messages from the playground, is, the subconscious beliefs that we pick up, and we have them about everything, about identity, about, again, money, about all of these things. And we take those messages in. It's part of a natural process. It's called introjection. It's an unconscious sort of defense mechanism that happens between a child, a young person, and their caregivers. So we introject the messages from the outside and we take them in, and not even knowing that they're not our own. And so part of the process of healing, and I say this in my book, very much is a deeply spiritual book, because really I sort of invite readers, as this is a process of unlearning. It's kind of taking out those splinters that you described, because we have so many of those splinters and we're not even aware that we have them. And so part of the healing journey for me is being intentional. It's kind of like getting tweezers, and then we get to kind of take out those splinters. And sometimes they could be painful, but the result is that it feels better after.
Yes, yes, yes. That so when it comes to disease, right? Um yeah, so many diseases are so they could be passed down in the DNA, right? Or genetically. But and I had this conversation recently with someone and yeah, that so we was having this conversation about um, some things that's going on through this person's family, and this person was concerned, and I get that. Um, However, I encourage this person, I reassured this person that just because this happened does not mean it's going to happen to you. And it is because it's the behaviors that actually bring a lot of diseases out. So I give you one from my family.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So we um there one of the things that were happening throughout the family was diabetes, right? And because of the background with the nursing and so forth, I believe that helped me, but also just having an awareness of how the body works. So when I saw this happening throughout the family, I was like, well, okay, well, let me. I could change this, right? I can break the cycle or change the cycle, I should say. And Black families, they call it generational curses. I choose not to call them curses. It's just cycles, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it takes somebody to have an awareness of what's going on and choosing to do something different to cycle out something new. So, and this was, not only for, to keep me from, becoming a diabetic, but to show family members of what's possible for
Yeah.
them. And because of this, and I hear that a lot, like you said, like you would go to the children and they're cycling those same notions, those same
Yes.
stories of what was
Yes.
told to you. You was
Yeah.
like, wow, that's what
Yeah. Yeah.
my family or people were saying around me. And
Yeah.
for decades, I've been here almost five decades now. It's, oh well, it's gonna happen because my aunt had this, my mama had this, but just because they did does not mean that you
Mm.
have to, like you said earlier about interject or take this on as your story or your life, because you don't. And even when, again, going back to the clinics and the different places, I would work with different patients. So even with the diabetic patients, it's like, okay, let's have a conversation.
Yeah.
Let's have a conversation of how the disease is working and what we can do to alleviate this. But having that conversation sometimes with people, it's like, nope, hey, this is what it is, and this is
Yeah.
what I'm gonna do. So
Yeah.
it's like you can even want the best for somebody to do something different and have a better life. Again, taking a splinter out, but sometimes people just get used to the splinter and they
Yeah.
just take it on part of their body.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's so true. And I mean, I love this conversation because I often think about, like kind of what we're talking about right now is about like families and even the generational sort of patterns that we find ourselves, and I think the process of the spiritual path, really a road trip to
Yes,
love, kind of and I could share more about that. But I mean, that's really what this process is kind of um, healing ourselves, because I
yes,
believe that, if I look at myself like my family's like a solar system, each of us is a planet,
mm,
and we may not see our gravitational pull, but
mm-hmm.
but our we're sort of our planetary system is sort of the gravitational pull affects each planet. and
Yes,
and so when one of us, myself as an example, when I started on the healing path, I didn't realize it, but my gravitational pull was impacting the planets around me. And so what I realized is that my own life, the way that I live my life, like my
yes,
healing
yes, yes.
is contributing to the collective healing. And I just had a conversation with a friend. We went to dinner last night, and I don't have children. Um, and I was sharing with my friend that I'm very okay with that, because I believe that, the work that I do in my life, the contribution that I'm making is helping
Yes,
the people who do have children, because
yes,
they're having children and they're bringing them into this planet. And so the more that I work and the more healing work that I do on my life, that is affecting that kind of solar system that I just described, because not only does it impact my family solar system, but also the world in which I live,
yes.
all the relationships that I have. And so I do believe that all of the healing work that we do in our lives is like a trickle effect, and it goes out. And we may not be able to visibly see it.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like I call this work like psychic surgery. It's kind of, it may not be visible, but it's
Mm.
invisible.
Mm. Oh, I love that.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
That's so aligning because I believe around the time, earlier I talked about these classes um that I took when I was still up north. I believe that's around the time that I noticed your book. It was probably out
Mm,
before that. And then I was like, because I'm taking these classes and I'm like, I'm learning this. And I'm like, wow, this would be
mm,
wonderful if his books was in the school system so they could,
mm,
like help. And yeah, and you affected me that way, by
mm.
seeing your book. I'm like, oh,
Wow, wow.
wow, this is so aligning. Here it is. I have been asking, the universe of show me, use me on more
Mm,
ways to love people, love people, love people. I want to be a vessel. I want to be a medium,
yeah.
which we all are, but just
Yeah.
fill me up with your love, fill me up with your love so it can be, poured out and it can be, just helping other people to be of love. That's exactly what you did in a post. It's like, oh,
Wow. Wow.
wow, that's another way for me to learn how to love because I
Yeah.
cannot say that I know everything about love.
Sure.
I mean, again, I only been here around 5 decades. There's so much more to love. It's so much more to experience. And the reason why we, again, go through these different situations on this planet is to teach us how to love
Yes.
and be in love.
Yes. Yes.
When I see um those experiencing, which yes I have, in my past, of those who do not like me, for
Mm,
their different reasons, whether it be because I'm Black, because I'm a woman, or just different reasons. I've come to the understanding it's not, I try not to focus in on the hate. I don't focus in on the hate. It's just their absence of love. If they
mm,
knew a little bit more me and knew a little bit of themselves and had those uncomfortable conversations, it's like, why
mm,
am I feeling this way? Whether it
mm,
be me or somebody
mm,
else, it's like, ask yourself, like, and then, like you said, when you were teaching and have been teaching the children about these stories that they have taken on and made their own. Well, this is what
mm.
my mom and dad said about money and this and that and the other. It's okay. Wait a minute, but that's what they said.
Yeah.
Is this
Yeah.
really how I feel? Is
Right.
this really how I should be acting through my life?
Yeah.
And then really asking like that the deeper question. It's like, is this even good for me?
Right.
This
Right.
benefiting me? Is this well
Right.
with my soul? I like to
Right.
say. It's
Right.
like, when we spew those actions out, or whether it be our, these words or just however, it is put out there into the world, it's not helping to make the world a better place,
Right.
so yeah, these conversations need to be had with all of us. And that's why a lot of these situations keep cycling because
Yes.
they're trying to have us sit down at that table.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, y'all ready to talk about it? Be like, nope, I'm gonna get up, I'm gonna walk up out of this office again. Like,
Right.
all right, see you next
Yeah.
time. Until the
Yeah.
next time, it's not gonna get no better, so.
Sure, sure. Yeah, no, it's so true. And I mean, even like just to kind of give your listeners an example, I think I think this is such a, for me, it was really powerful is, around money. And
Mm,
just to give an example of some of the things that if our families, like I come from a generation that came from a generation that came from a generation, and all of those beliefs are
mm-hmm,
passed down. And most of our beliefs aren't really our own beliefs. It's
mm-mm,
it's 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 we grow up into a family that came from a place that came from a place that came from a place that had experiences that informed their beliefs. And so then they raise their kids with the sort of consciousness.
mm,
And so part of the spiritual path for me is about, that you people here use the word awakening. It's kind of because
mm.
you're kind of waking up to realize, wait, these beliefs, where did they come from?
Right.
Like, and for me, I started to sort of challenge, wait, do I believe this, or is this something that, is it true with a capital
Mm-mm,
T? um and I'll never forget, I was teaching a class, and like I mentioned, the class Who Am I? And this group of young people, they were junior high. And so it was like an after school or a summer program. And I'll never forget this. I usually would ask everyone, what did you write? Okay, let's hear what people wrote. Like, give me an example. Like what are some thoughts that people wrote about money? Because like I
mm.
said, money is, it's kind of like people, I think, are, especially young people, they're more apt to share things that maybe like are less personal.
Yes.
So when I asked about, like, what do you believe about your body, or what do you believe about success, that's a little bit more kind of vulnerable. And so at the group level, I would always pick something that was more kind of, group level share.
Okay.
So I asked, what are some of the people wrote about thoughts about money? What do you believe about money? And this one little, boy raised his hand. I say little because I think maybe he was 10.
Mm-hmm.
And he raised his hand, he like flew his hand up, and he was like, I wrote, money is the root of all evil.
Oh, that's
And
familiar.
yeah, I mean, I come from and I was like, whoa, this is, like I said, junior high. These kids are, I think maybe, he's
Mm,
10 or 11. I'm like, that's a pretty like charged belief.
wow.
And I, from religion, I know that that comes from the sort of religious, background that I have. And it's not even the full, this is an example of how oftentimes the sort of scriptures are misinterpreted.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's just part of the scripture. And
Mm-hmm.
so I asked him, I'm like, that's a pretty strong belief you have, about money. Money is the root of all evil. I go, that's your belief? And he was like, yes. And I'm like,
Mm.
it's
And he
not some,
stood on it,
yeah,
huh?
yeah, he stood on it. And I go, it's not something that you heard? And he's like, no, this is what I believe. And I'm like, okay.
Mm,
I'm like, well, and what I was trying to invite him to, and this is the whole kind of point of the work that I do is there's our conscious mind and then our subconscious mind.
mm,
So someone who has the belief that money is the root of all evil, even though they could consciously recognize, I need money to pay rent, I need money to buy groceries. Oh my gosh.
wow, that was cool.
That's so funny. The new Zoom, yeah.
Ah.
um, um, but so even though he could consciously recognize that he needs money, subconsciously, if he has the belief that money is the root of all evil,
Mm,
he's not going to want to keep his money.
no.
And so
Mm,
that's an example of where, so I asked him, I'm like, well, do you want to, when you turn 16, do you want to drive? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, so do you maybe want to, get a car? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe, when you get older, do you want to have a house? And he was like, yeah. I'm like, okay, so, do you think that you're going to want to buy a house? And he was like, yeah. I'm like, okay, well, money, those are things that you can buy with money. And he's like,
mm,
well, he's like, well, that's what my mom always says. So the more I
mm,
was the money is the root
mm,
of all evil. So the more that I was able to talk to him, the more that I was able to help him see that that's actually not his belief.
mm-hmm,
It's something that he hears from his mom a lot. And so
mm-hmm,
what we were doing in that moment was sort of separating himself from that belief.
mm-hmm.
And that's what the invitation here with all of the conversations that we have when we're on the healing journey is to be able to separate ourselves from the things that we've been told, that we've introjected,
Yes.
that we've internalized. And so the more we work on those things, the more that we can recognize, like, oh, so if I have a belief that, like, going back to gender or sexuality, if
Mm-hmm.
I have a belief that, being gay or what it means to talk to my kids about sexuality is misguided, then
Mm,
then 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 I'm sort of perpetuating those beliefs, and then the children around me are going to internalize those beliefs. And then, like the splinters, going back to the analogy, a lot of my own healing work
mm.
came from having to externalize a lot of the messages that I had internalized.
You know, it with children, and it took me into like, ooh, shoot, maybe 10 years ago for me to really realize the impact that we make on children. And
Mhm.
that children are just walking sponges, just
Yes,
just taking
yes,
in everything we seeing
yeah,
and doing.
yeah, yeah,
And it makes me think of, when I was growing up, that's one thing that my parents, my grandparents, so when it came to disagreements, not to saying that adults should not disagree in front of children, but show them how to work through a disagreement.
yeah.
Um, we didn't see a lot of that. So, and that's so, it's okay. It worked out. I had to go through some things to, find out how, and still working through of how
Mhm.
to, when, my husband and I, when we worked through disagreements, but it took a long time for me to understand that, the importance of children seeing that in a healthy manner. But
Yes.
again, with children being the sponges that they are, I can remember, right? Of like you said earlier about the things that we're saying and we're not saying. So when I wasn't hearing them disagree, it's like, okay, when I started to get in relationships, marriages, it's like, so what do I do? You know, and this is no, you know, nothing against, you know, my grandparents and my parents, because they was working off of how they were taught for a long time. In Black families, it was, no, you know, you do this behind closed doors, and a lot of things, yeah, should be private, but we were taught to hold in a lot of secrets. I'm just gonna call a thing a thing. We was told, we were taught, and again, this is, you know, my parents, my grandparents, even me, because I practiced that as well, that no, anything that's going on with you, you internalize it, you hold that thing, you keep that splinter in you. Just let it get embedded in your skin, and let the callus go over it. It might hurt after a while, but like, nope, I'm not taking it out. So, you know, when grandchildren started to come into our lives, and then I would see them just eyes just up when they hear us, even if there's a slight change in our tone. It's like in antennas going up. What they finna say? What they finna do? And then I would stop, and I would, you know, tell my husband, like, okay, we got to make sure, because, you know, sometimes we did disagree in front of them. We were like, okay, we have to fix this, and we have to show them how to fix it, because we making impressions, right? Just like how the different platforms work, whether it be Facebook, Instagram, you know, they're just constantly, the more that we're seeing, and, you know, it's putting impressions. So just like with the cute little baby, I know he's 10 years old. Kids don't like to call me babies, but I just feel sometimes I go to the schools, I'm like, oh, y'all so cute. They were like, oh, I'm a teenager. But even with him, because he was being impressed upon, you know, well, this is how, you know, I'm supposed to feel about money, but we're not taking that time to see as an adult, you know, what we're doing to kids.
You're right.
And we went, and later on, you know, sometimes this is what I want to say first. Sometimes we have to ask ourselves, like I was saying earlier, if this is this really benefiting me, right? You know, so if I'm going to act this way, this is the practice in my life. And then we have children, and we don't even have to per se have children, you know, that are ours, but they all are children, because like you are doing, you are teaching, you are helping children, you know, throughout LA, and then with your book, their families. So we have to ask ourselves, like, okay, what I'm practicing, what I'm doing, is this good for me? And how is this being impressed out into the world? Because it's always somebody watching, even if it's a little kid, like a little sponge. Listen, another adult, like, you know, that's questioning, you know, it might be to, you know, wanting to know more about something, and then they're watching you, and they're, you know, especially again with the social media and so forth, it's like, I even have to question myself, make sure that the message that you're putting out there is rooted in love. And sometimes I might, you know, put something out, and yes, it may, you know, the basis of it is, you know, being about love and so forth, but I just want to make sure that the message, as much as possible, goes out right, and that, you know, it makes a good impression on somebody.
No, I fully wholeheartedly agree. And I think, you know, I think this is such an important opportunity that we have, even talking about this for your listeners, is that, you know, I think one of the most wonderful things that what I'm hearing you describe too is like kids, they're sponges. And what I say often is that kids are so intuitive, like they pick up on everything, and they're not so great at interpretation always. And so that's the opportunity that we have as sort of the adults in their lives, is we teach through our demonstration. And so sometimes the conversations aren't going to go great. And so for your listeners out there, like, you know, I'm uncomfortable, or how do I talk to my kids? And what I invite all the time is that this isn't a one-time conversation. You know, it's an often and ongoing conversation. Sometimes we're going to get it right, sometimes we're not. But the opportunity there is we get to model to young people what it's like to make a mistake, to not get it right. You know, where if there's a rupture in therapy, the work I do in therapy, it's like if there's a rupture, there's an opportunity for repair. And it's in the
Yes.
repair that there's a greater opportunity for healing. And so with young people, it's like we get to model through this relationship that we have of what it's like to be deeply human.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the conversations that we have, we're going to know how to talk about them. And when you know, my book, you know, specifically around LGBTQ, you know, everyone has gender, everyone has sexuality. And so when we're even talking to kids about, you know, their bodies are going through a normal, natural development. And so when we give them the opportunity to consider that their sexuality, when through having these conversations, I believe that we have the opportunity to help them understand that their sexuality is something sacred.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's
it's
good.
and also we're teaching them healthy boundaries, and we're teaching them, you know, a lot of the things that we can do to prevent sometimes
Mm,
harm that could come their way, because
mm,
we're helping them to name their experiences, name their feelings. We're giving them the sort of space for them
mm,
to consider themselves, you know, and that's where our work comes, because
mm-hmm.
the more that I work on my own self, the more that I am comfortable and able to help, you know, have those conversations, you know, with younger people.
Mm. Oh, I want to touch upon that. And I'm glad that you are talking about that in your book and when you go and speak about your book, because that is so important. And I know we cannot rewind and go back when Nikki took sex education class
Yeah, yeah,
and they
yeah,
just told us this is this, and this is
yeah,
how you make a baby. And
yeah,
that's all, you know, and of course they were just teaching off of what the curriculum that was
sure,
laid out in front of them. And but yeah, you know, when I was young, you know, when it came to sexuality, it was, you know, going through puberty and you're feeling these feelings, and you know your body is changing. And again, you know, that's something that's in a process of being better, that's going through healing, even in the Black community. Of, you know, like I said, it was a lot of secrets, and then a lot of
yes,
those secrets were, no, we don't talk about our bodies, we don't talk about your
yeah,
feelings.
yeah, yeah,
And I'm so glad we are becoming better with that. And so when I was going through puberty, it's like, okay, this is changing. And now, you know, when I see, you know, what was just a friend
mm-hmm,
before,
mm-hmm,
now
mm-hmm.
I look at him and I'm, you know, and so it's like, no, because it was considered dirty.
Yes,
It was shame was stamped upon it.
yeah,
So I'm so glad you're doing that, Chris. Oh my
yeah,
God, because unfortunately, including me, children go out, and still adults, but children go out and they do things because they're curious,
yeah,
right? You know,
sure,
they want to know how things work in this world. And if you're not going to
yeah,
teach it, then they're going to find a way to learn. And
yeah,
the way that I learned about sex was
mm-hmm.
not only sex education class, but it was another child. It was another child, because I
Yeah,
was like, no, I can't kiss, you know, because if he kissed me, I'm gonna get pregnant, because that's what I was
yeah,
told.
yeah,
I was
yeah,
told, you like, no, you can't kiss boys because that's gonna make you fast and you're gonna get pregnant. I was like, oh my
yeah,
God.
yeah,
I was like, no, little so and so, you cannot kiss me. I'm gonna be pregnant, and my my family's gonna
yeah,
be dead. And God bless her wherever she is. She said, Nikki, no, that is not how it works. This is,
mm-hmm.
you know, you lay down and this. I was like, what?
Yeah, yeah, sure, sure, sure.
So, you know, and because of this curiosity that was going on in
Yeah,
me, I
yeah,
went out into like, okay, let me try this, let me try that. And
mm-hmm.
just, you know, just pulling at straws, that you can say. It's like, oh, let's see if this works. Oh, okay. And yeah, I know that's part of the process of, you know, of us throughout our life, but how much better it can be when we educate our children
Yeah,
and
yes,
teaching them, you know, that your body, like you said, oh, Chris, that your body is sacred. And yes, I know
sacred.
you want to go lay down with this person, but let's talk about how, you know, loving yourself is, like you said, which I'm a firm believer in, creating boundaries. It's like, you
Mm-hmm,
know, and ask yourself, is this what, you know, yeah,
mm-hmm,
I know this might be fun and everything,
mm-hmm,
but let's talk about, you know, protection, or, you know, what can happen afterwards. Because
mm-hmm.
another thing that was always told was, oh, you're gonna get pregnant, you're gonna be pregnant, you're gonna get pregnant. They tell that to little girls, but then it's not also talking about your feelings can get hurt too.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so we gotta have those conversations. I'm having these conversations now, and I, even again, we're still in the process of healing. Like even when I
Yeah.
talk to the little ones, because the grandchildren are young, but still because of the internet, you have to get to them early and start
Oh
having these
yeah.
conversations. So I
You do.
feel more freer because of what I went through, and make sure that it's important to have these conversations when I
Mm-hmm.
can with them,
Mm-hmm.
the importance of their body, how they take care of their body,
Mm-hmm.
and when
Mm-hmm.
they decide to make that decision to unite it with someone else. But
Yeah.
it's more than just, it's just sex. Your body is here to be in love, and how
Oh
we,
yeah.
it might exhibit it, through our love, through being, sexual
Sure.
with someone. But yeah, that to me, the basis of it, or the foundation is how how am I doing with myself? Because sometimes, unfortunately, so I'm currently in South Florida, and
Mm.
Florida is a state that is big on sex trafficking. And yeah, so when I would work at these different schools, and just the unawareness,
Mm-hmm.
um of children that, even in 2000, what is 2024 now, but 2024, that still are not knowing how important they are, that
Mm-hmm.
they, again, self-love, making sure that they are, treating themselves as sacred. And when they choose
Mm-hmm.
to unite with someone, that
Mm-hmm.
this is a sacred act that they're,
Mm-hmm.
choosing to give with
Mm-hmm.
somebody else. um, they're unaware because unfortunately their
Yeah.
parents and so forth. So when
Yes.
I would have these conversations with them, and it's like, oh, well, this is what's going on at the home. And this is like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Same thing with me, even if I wasn't seeing it, or, but
Mm-hmm.
like you said earlier, the things that we not saying and things we not doing are speaking volumes
Yeah,
too.
sure, sure, sure. Yeah. No, you touched on so many important things, and and this is a really big conversation. And one of the things that because I work with a lot of primarily adults, and a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the work that I do with adults, regardless of their age, mostly men, I work with some heterosexual men as well. And regardless of whether or not they're heterosexual, gay, those are kind of the clients that I primarily work with,
Mm-hmm.
is I'm helping them to resolve feelings of shame they have around their
Mm-hmm.
sexuality. I have a heterosexual client who he has a porn addiction. And one of the things that I'm really helping, we're doing a lot of like inner child work,
Oh,
because,
good.
yeah, because, no one ever talked to him about
Mm.
his body. No one ever talked to him about,
Oh.
hormones and what it was like. And most kids, just the research shows that most children are exposed to pornography by the age of 12. And that's actually, I would venture to say it's even earlier now with social media and just the way
Mm-hmm.
that, everything gets passed around and shared.
Yeah.
And so if we're not having conversations, we're not helping proactively equip children with an understanding. And one of the things too, and this is a really important and I think big conversation, but you mentioned, sex trafficking. And when it comes to perpetrators, pedophiles who are, harming young people, is the research shows that pedophiles seek out vulnerable children.
Mm-hmm.
And so for children, especially, I work, again, primarily with gay men, is there's a lot of shame around our identities
Mm.
of what it's like. When I was 6 and knowing that I was gay, I didn't know what gay meant. And that's the thing I to talk about in my book, is that, we put oftentimes our adult constructs of
Mm.
sexuality onto children. That's not what this is about. This is about getting on their level and understanding that I developed, you developed, we all develop. And
Yeah.
and so for me at 6 years old, it wasn't like what I know now about being gay. It was at the time, I had crushes, I had feelings, and that's what sexuality is. It's more than, our growing, region. It's about our hearts and like
Yes.
and the feelings that we have. And so, because I was gay and I grew up in a religious household, I internalized messages that were, oh, I'm bad, this is wrong. And
Oh,
so I had a lot of shame. And so for children who have a lot of shame, and I saw it when I taught social emotional learning, is they sort of, you could see it in their body language, the way they carry
mm,
themselves. They're separate from the group. And so if for someone who's a pedophile, if they're seeking out vulnerable children, it's the children who aren't equipped
yes.
to have conversations or understand themselves. And so really what this is about, Nikki, really what this is about, it's about equipping children with the ability to consider themselves, to love themselves, to
Yes.
consider themselves as sacred, to instill in them self-esteem, to instill in them confidence. And so what we're doing with that is we're preventing harm that could come their way, because I think as a human, we all have the experience of not feeling worthy. And so if we can help children understand that they have inherent worth by virtue of being who they are,
Yes.
then we can prevent a lot of harm that can happen.
When I tell you, Chris, that this is part of healing, like you said with one of your clients of helping him heal from his addiction to pornography. Um, and you're working with him, with, dealing with the inner child. And I know that that is part of this, you sharing the space, not only with the audience, but with me, is talking to that inner child. It
Yes.
took me a long time to uh come out of that,
Mm,
of shame.
mm,
Like I said, and again, this is nothing against, my parents, my grandparents, they were doing the best that they could, and like you said, oh, I love that, they were just going off of where they were. And I'm
yep.
pretty sure if they knew different, they would have did different.
Yes. Yes.
And because I was so curious, I'm like, ooh, oh, going through puberty and all these things going on, and when nobody talking to me about what was going on with my body, here it was that, oh, it seemed like overnight, these things started to develop for me.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And then I started to notice things developing on boys, and I'm like, oh. So
Yeah.
I went out and I experimented.
Hmm.
And from that, I was pregnant with my twins at 14,
Wow.
and I was felt I was led to feel so to be filled with shame for a long
Mm,
time,
hmm, hmm.
and that I just went into a shell, and I was just like, well, there's no use of like really
Mm.
trying to, all these different things, because that it's like you unplugging that somebody, the outlet, the power, or a lamp. You just pull the plug on them, and it's their light
Yeah.
goes out. And
Right.
it's like
Right.
even the things that I wanted to do in my life back then, all of that everything went dark.
Mm,
And besides me, going through with, okay, here it is. I'm a child having children. What do I do with this? What's
hmm.
still, hey, I still want to know what's going on with my body, and my body just made another change. I'm trying to figure that out.
Yeah. It's a
So,
lot.
unfortunately, coming from different places, it's like, oh, you're this and you're that, and then
Yeah.
and the other. So I gave up on myself.
Mm,
And so that's another reason why, like, when I would go and be a nurse at the different schools, and I would be blessed with the opportunity to work in schools with those little girls that was
yeah.
like Nikki, and
Yeah. Yeah.
and they would, say to themselves, well, there's no use of me doing nothing in my life because I had a child or this happened to me and stuff. And I'm like, no, no, it's not over. I don't want it to be over for you. I hope you choose for it not to be over, because yes, I was pregnant at 14. Matter of fact, I had 3 children before I finished high school. Yes, these different things happened to me, but if you choose to do differently, which I didn't understand, that it was me being absent of loving myself, that
Yeah.
I didn't understand how sacred my body was. I did not understand just me.
Yeah.
So when I know I was going in a so-called nurse shell, but
Mm,
hey, to go plug somebody's light back in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what I know. I know, oh my God, that you're doing for so many people, Chris. And I
Mm.
applaud you for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, no
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even being able to share your story, what you just shared, I mean, that's the testimony to the healing, you know. I remember what you shared right now reminded me of when I used to teach in juvenile hall, and I used to
Mm,
teach in Los Angeles juvenile hall. They have it divided by the girls and the boys, and so we would go into the girls unit and give our classes, and then we would go into the boys side and give our classes. And I remember, and this kind of goes back full circle to a road trip to love, is that, really incorporating things like forgiveness for
mm,
ourselves is part of that path. And
yes.
and I remember this one girl, we were doing a class on forgiveness, and um I'll never forget, I asked, we were, going around, there was a journal prompt that we would have them write, and she raised her hand, and I went over and went next to her, and she said, can I forgive myself for having a miscarriage?
Mm,
And I think she was maybe 16, and I was like, oh my gosh, of course. And it
mm,
was like she didn't even know that that was a possibility.
mm,
And what that told me is that how much shame she had carried, and maybe thinking it was her fault, and like all the things. And that's one of the things I learned for sure, because I taught in juvenile hall for 2 years, and this kind of just goes overall with our conversation, is that most kids don't wake up and make a choice and then wind up in juvie.
right.
They
That's
they
true.
come they come from a system
Yes.
where they weren't taught about certain things or emotions. And again, this isn't about blame, it's about understanding, the generational cycles and patterns.
Mhm.
And so when we work on ourselves, when we do the work, we help to break
Yes.
those systems.
Oh, that's so, yes. Oh, wow. Ooh. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Yes, it's
Yeah.
that forgiveness, Chris. Woo.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's and that's part of the journey, the road to healing, to love, period. Loving ourselves, being able to love others is,
Hmm.
like you said earlier about the little boy, the little baby, God bless him wherever he at, 10-year-old that said about money being the root to evil. And of course,
Hmm.
it's more than that. That's just like that other verse that says something about family. Oh, I was reading this recently,
Hmm.
and but it's, which a lot of stuff is misconstrued. I just put it this way: we're not getting the force of it. We kind of cutting and away at
Yeah.
what we say is okay with us, but then it's not really okay, and then we make this true in our minds and in our life. But
Right.
yeah, with us, it's like, yeah, that forgiveness. When we are not forgiving ourselves, like I said, for a long time, I took that. I'm a reader. I love reading. I love those
Mm.
those it was a lot of the books that they would give us to read in high school.
Mm.
I was that person that would read the book, go research on it a little bit more. If the movie come out, and one of them was a Scarlet Letter,
Wow.
and I knew because that was how I was feeling, right? Because I was
Hmm.
wearing that Scarlet Letter,
Yes.
and I wore that Scarlet Letter for so long that
Wow.
I impressed it into my heart, to my
Mm.
soul.
Mm.
And then, yeah, like I said, I unplugged myself, a lot of things
Yeah.
that I wanted to do and be. And it
Yeah.
took some time. It took, because I know that the universe is always, here to help us. So the universe
Yeah.
putting people in my life and say, you still matter and this and that.
Hmm.
And it helped pull me out of that hole.
Mm.
And from that process of still wearing shame,
Mm.
I made the choices to be with people, God bless them, because they was lessons that were not the
Mm.
best for me. I figured, well,
Yeah.
hey, I don't really love myself, because that's really what it was. Yeah,
Hmm.
you could treat me any old kind of way, because
Hmm.
I'm not supposed to forgive myself for what I did. I'm supposed to wear that scarlet letter for the rest of my life. And
Mm.
it took until the who I'm with now, my current husband, when I met him,
Mm.
and it was like, I don't care. I don't care,
Mm.
what you've been through, whatever. I just want to love you.
Yeah. Yeah.
and taught me, how it felt to be, even in terms of me loving myself and being loved by somebody wanting the best for you. And like
Sure.
you said, with these children, unfortunately, a lot of them don't know what that feels like. They don't know what it looks
Yes.
like.
Yes.
If they're coming from homes, and that's yeah. I don't believe no child is bad.
Mm-mm.
Their
Mm-mm.
behavior is speaking into a lot of stuff.
Yes.
When I would go and mm, it's not only at the high schools. When I was growing up, it was really the high schools that was having the fights and so
Mm-hmm.
forth.
Mm-hmm.
But it's happening in the elementary schools too. And I would hear people say, "Well, that's because so and so is bad." It's like, no, they're trying to say something, but they don't know how to express it.
Yes.
Sometimes all they need is a hug, somebody to listen to them. It
Yeah.
got it got so with some of the nursing offices I would go work through in the agency where they didn't come down because they had a cut or
Mm.
medication. They just wanted to come sit down
Uh,
and just talk or wanted a
yeah.
hug or wanted
Yeah.
a snack because a lot of these kids wouldn't eat. And I know you know that,
Yeah.
Chris.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
like, how can we really function throughout our life if we're not only eating but being nourished? And
Yeah.
hey, the biggest nourishment is love. If they're
Yep.
not getting injected with love, why would they not, not to excuse nothing, but why wouldn't they, yell at a teacher or hit a student or whatever? Because it's showing that they're absent of this. So it's like,
Yeah.
well, hey, let's try something different. Instead of just suspending them and, putting them away, how show them how they are included to this planet because they do matter.
Yes.
They're just not
Yes.
somebody, oh, you just roll call. No, that's a whole human being that you're
Yeah.
responsible for.
Yeah.
They're all our
Absolutely.
children. They're all our
Yes.
children.
Yeah. 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 You mentioned you used the word recovery at the very beginning of our conversation. And for me, the path of recovery is we're recovering ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so everything that you just shared is like really the opportunity here is to reconnect with ourselves, through this process, through your process that you just so beautifully shared is what I hear is like you disconnected and then you reconnected and you
Mm.
reconnected to yourself, you recovered yourself.
Yes. Oh my God, Chris, it's again, we're still in a process. We're on a journey, down
Yes.
here, and we just still should, just be open. Like universe, just keep teaching me, show me, how I could be better for myself, and be better for others. Because, like you said, when we're, the more we are healed, the better we can be and show up in other people's lives. And it's like, if I was to have that little Nikki sit here,
Mm,
and that's
mm.
again what I see not only in and all the children, I'm like, oh, that looks familiar. Oh my God. It's like, I'm like,
Mm.
oh, I know what you're doing. Though God is not just this one person, it's everything. But I'm just like, oh, okay, I know what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
know what
yeah.
you're helping me to, and I choose to believe that it was my contract. It was my spirit's contract to take these assignments on, and to go through them, grow through
Mm-hmm.
them to
Mm-hmm.
help
Mm-hmm.
other people, kind
100%.
of to pull them out of the hole and help plug their light back in.
100%. 100%. Yep. Yeah, the last chapter of my book is called Uncle Chris, The Journey of a Soul.
Oh,
And it's everything that you just shared. I believe that we all have our lessons that we're here to learn. And through that process of learning, the hero's journey, for any of your listeners who are familiar. And it's, I would often bring this up in whenever the classes I taught, because I would always ask them, what's your favorite movie? Like, what's your favorite movie? And the kids, usually would like say some Disney movie or some, and I would always invite them, the sort of hero's journey of that
yeah.
story is that we relate to that story. We like that. We love those movies because we can see ourselves on a soul level in that story. And I would always ask them, well, what's the end of the hero's journey? What's the end of the journey in that movie? And it's usually, well, when they win the battle or when they fight the thing and they, And I'm like, the real end of the hero's journey is when we take back to the village what we learned.
Yes.
And so this conversation that you and I are having, the work that we're doing in our own lives is that we're taking what we learned from our soul contracts, our lessons, and we're bringing it back to the village to share.
Yes.
The
And
village
that's
being our communities, our families.
and that's how you pass the healing on. It's like
Yes.
I had Dr. G, another therapist, on some weeks ago, and he's doing a retreat actually next month, and he says when these men come to the retreat, it's not only about healing you, you're gonna go back and help heal your family.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
then thus, the community, and that's how
Yeah.
we all become better. Oh,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah. 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 It's the cycle. It's what we're here for.
yes. Oh my God. Like you said earlier, and I feel the same way is, we're all world sharing this beautiful, Mother Earth, but how we choose the cycle, how we choose to, just be better with this world, how it affects, others. And that's, one of the things that I ask myself when I go out throughout the day is, how can I be better? How can
Mm,
I make this day better for somebody else? Because
mm,
it's not just about me. We
mm,
all parts of the whole.
mm-hmm.
It's not just the heart be like, oh, I'm running this whole show, and it's like, no, heart, what you doing affects the lungs and vice versa, and the kidneys. We all, supposed to be down here working for this whole entire
Yeah.
system.
System. Yes. Amen. Yes.
So tell everyone a road trip. Oh, I do want to ask you this before we go. So when you lived in Mexico, you
Yeah.
said that you came out when you was in Mexico. Why Mexico?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a whole other conversation. But
Okay,
no,
okay.
no, no, no. I could share. I mean, it's a beautiful story. This is one of the things I write about, in my book, is that in my experience, whenever I would go to schools before I wrote my book, I would sometimes go to high schools if there was like bullying going on, like
Mm-hmm.
anti-LGBTQ bullying. I was part of a PFLAG, Parents and Families of the LGBTQ Community.
Oh,
It's a
okay.
wonderful organization. For any of your listeners, it's nationwide. They have chapters all throughout the country. And so in Los
Okay.
Angeles, they have a speakers bureau. And so I was part of the speakers bureau where we would go in and share like 5 minutes of our story, coming out story, whatever we wanted to share. And then we would open it up to questions. And there was usually like this, a conversation. And so what was
Mm-hmm.
so amazing is that when I was invited to come and speak for the first time, I didn't really think about like what I was going to share. I mean, there's so many aspects of my journey of coming out. And so I wound up sharing my story of coming out, which was when I graduated college. I wound up getting a job. I think definitely hindsight's 2020, but I definitely think that it was because I was still in the closet and because
Mm-hmm.
I still had a lot of shame. I say in college, growing up, I learned I could have won an Oscar for the role that I played as a, heterosexual guy because I literally like did all the things. And then after I graduated college is when all my friends were starting to get married and I was going to a lot of weddings and everyone was asking me like, why don't you have a girlfriend? Like, when are you going to get married? And so there was a lot of pressure.
Uh-huh.
And so I wound up, there was an opportunity and a job and I interviewed. And so I moved to Mexico for work. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
when I was living there and, I share this story, but because I spoke English, the company I worked for was a North American company, and so they wanted me to go to the airport to pick up some visitors because they
Okay.
wanted to give a tour of the plant. I worked for a corrugated box company,
Okay.
so we did like corrugated box packaging and that kind of thing. We had a warehouse, and so there were some visitors from North America, from Texas, and so I went to pick them up. And again, another example, I picked them up and they're all these, heterosexual guys, and they're like, and I was 20, maybe three. And so they were asking me a lot of questions about the girls and
Mm.
how many girlfriends do I have? And, how are the Mexican women? And just all these questions that literally were like nails on a chalkboard. Because I was in the closet and it was really, at that time, I was probably in the lowest place because I just,
Mm.
um, I couldn't see a way out of this. And when I say this, I mean, I was fundamentally being challenged with my identity, because here I was with my religion, but then also these feelings that I had my whole life that it was just getting so difficult. So I go and pick them up. The idea was that I was going to take them back to the office to give them a tour. But on our way back, they're like, we're really tired from our flight. Would you mind just dropping us off at our hotel, and then we'll go, we could do the tour tomorrow. And I was like, great. So I dropped them off, and then that meant that I needed to get lunch on my own. So I went to a Subway. All these little details are part of the sort of construct of the story, but I go to this Subway and I go in, get a sandwich, and I don't drink soda, and all they had was soda. And so there's a Benavides across the street. A Benavides is like a Walgreens or CVS, kind of store to get it. I was just going to go in there to get like a water.
Okay.
So I walk in the Benavides, and this is like in the middle of the day on a Tuesday, and I'm walking in the Benavides, and this guy walks out, and I remember we looked at each other, and I just felt so seen. I remember, and also he was really handsome, and I was like, I was like, oh my gosh, and I started having these like my heart started kind of beating. I was nervous, my palms were getting sweaty, and I remember I told myself, I'm like, oh, the way he looked at me, like I said, I felt really seen. I told myself I must look like his cousin's friend. That's what I like,
You made up something.
Yeah,
He can't just be looking at me.
Yeah. And so I go to get the drink, and I walk back to the register, and I could see him in his car, because big window, and I could see him in his car, and he was pretending to read like a magazine or something, but he was like looking at me. And I had always, from the messages that I got growing up around being gay and what being gay meant, it was this like deviant, like dirty, bad thing, like perverse. And so I had always thought that like gay men like meet in dark alleys, or it was like just this really like dark construct of sexuality. And so here I am, middle of the day on a Tuesday, and I'm like, whoa. And I was feeling like, I was like, am I having a heart attack? Like, because I literally was, and what I realized is I had a crush. I was feeling what it's like, when you see someone and you have feelings, or you're attracted. And I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah. And so I literally, I was walking out, I walked out, and I was walking toward my car, and I was like, you know what? I don't know anyone in Mexico. I have nothing to lose. I barely speak Spanish. So I walked back to his car, and he rolled down the window, and I said, hola, nada más quería decir hola, like in my broken Spanish. And what that means is I just want to say hi. And he was like, oh, you're not from here, in English. And so, we started talking, and I was like nervous, but also really comfortable. And so he asked for my number, but I didn't feel comfortable giving him my number. So I took his number. And so I remember I went back to work, and I literally went to my cubicle, and I just started writing like a poem. And I remember I felt like I was on a mountain, and I wanted to like shout and tell everyone how I felt.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my gosh, this feeling, like I'm willing to go with this feeling. And so that was sort of the beginning process of me coming out.
I like that you said, well, first of all, thank you for sharing your story.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's like, you said about being seen.
Yes.
That's, so everything worked, because that's how the universe do, right? So the guys wanted to go back to the hotel. They were like, oh, I'm tired or whatever.
Yeah.
For you to go to the
Benavides, yes.
Benavides? Nikki, work on your Spanish. Note to self, work on yourself. That's a shame, because the Spanish speaking husband, but yeah.
Oh, okay.
But that worked out. All of that was designed to help you, not, yes, to come out, but to allow yourself to be you, allow yourself to be seen. And like, we even said of the children, when they are, oh, I'm going to yell at this teacher. Oh, I'm going to do this. They're trying to say, hey, they're trying to say that they're trying to be seen. But this is what's going on with me. I don't know how to deal with this. And for you to choose even in that moment, because you could have still been like, nope, I'm still not gonna be myself. No,
Yeah.
even though all this has happened to make
Yeah.
this to help me, to be who I am. But it's like,
Mhm.
nope, and look at there. That's one of the questions that you ask your children. I know they're not, but they all are children, right? But the
Yeah.
children, who am I?
Yeah. Who
Because
am
of
I?
what you healed through.
Yeah.
And you finally come into that understanding and you standing firm, and it's like, this is who I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what I want everyone to be. Everyone. Because
Yes.
again, the biggest message we missing down here, y'all.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how to love each other.
Yep.
And it
Yep.
all starts from you. Who am I? This is who I am, whatever it is, green, purple, whatever. This is who I
Yes.
am. This is who God made me to be.
Yes.
And I love myself. And we also, and other people are able to see you, how you love yourself, no matter what, their own narratives are. Well, no, you're not supposed to love yourself because, like you say, you've been told that, oh, that's not a good thing. Me being told, oh, you get pregnant when you was in high school, you're not supposed to care about yourself. And when I came to that awakening, that understanding, it's like, yes, I do matter, and I'm supposed to still love myself, and to share that, be a presence of that to other young girls or even adults. It's like, that's how we helping other ways, and how we help to
Yeah.
heal people. Stand in who you are and who God made you to be.
Yes. 100%. 100%.
Love
And
on
that really,
yourself.
yes. And really, that's really what for me, a road trip to love is that I believe that we're all on a journey of
Yes,
love, self-love, love of another person, love of a higher power. God is love.
yes,
Whatever your version of
yes,
God, higher power is, it's love. And so it's not a journey to arrive at, it's a destination. And I mean, it's not a destination to arrive at, it's a journey, it's a
yes,
process, it's an uncovering, it's a recovering.
yes.
And that's for me what a road trip to love is. And so
Mm-hmm.
for me, it was my experience of learning how to love myself,
Mm.
of loving another person, redeveloping also through this process, redeveloping a relationship with a higher power
Yes,
who loves me and is not
yes.
judging me, which ultimately I think is the most powerful tool that we can teach someone,
Mm-hmm.
um, is that this universe loves them and supports
Yes,
them and is
yes.
not judging them and persecuting
No.
them.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Mm-mm. It's, when people talk about family, and I'm like, oh, this. I said, we all family down here. We all brothers and sisters,
Mm.
and we all have a sibling rivalry. It's not just, and that's all blood. I just thought about that verse. Blood is thicker than water or something. That
Mm.
that has been misconstrued. That if
Mm-hmm.
the full meaning, or to read the entire verse or the teaching of it, is really saying that those who that is not, though we all biologically connected somehow too, but those who are not per se your family, your mama's sister's kids and so forth, that is saying that those who you choose to be your family, is that their bond is
Mm.
stronger than that you are cousins with, brothers with, and so forth. And when I
Yes.
had read that, I was like, and see, that's how I feel. It's like when we would, go to different places and travel and so forth, I would look to see how I can connect with someone else. Because again, I'm asking, show me love, show me love. Use
Mm.
me to experience love, because all this is helping to heal the inner child, where I was like in the darkness for so long, and now I'm in the
Yeah.
light. I'm like, oh, look at those people over
Yeah.
there. They're like,
Yeah.
who is that?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's we all here to love each other, y'all. Oh my
Yes.
God. I'm here
Yes.
to tell you, when you just allow yourself to be loved, you just look for love everywhere else.
Yeah.
I love that like even with peace, I would hear people say, oh, I just lost it. But this is what I want to say. When you are in peace within yourself, you're
Mhm.
gonna want that in somebody else's life.
Yes. Yeah.
And I feel the same when someone is not having love within themselves, they're
Mhm.
absent for love, and they may, if you choose to say, hey, but I just like to say absence of love, of course they're gonna spew that out. I'm not
Mhm.
excusing nothing that nobody is doing down here, but
Mhm.
if they fill themselves up
Mhm.
and come and have those, like Chris said earlier, having those uncomfortable conversations with themselves
Mhm.
and just showing up for themselves of how they can be who God made them to be.
Mhm.
And that helps to be an example to other people of how they can be loved. That's
Yes.
that's,
Yes.
that's all.
Yes, 100%. And I think what you said, something really key is also to this whole, the piece I think also is really important that not a lot of us really consider is to receive, allowing ourselves to receive love,
Mm.
the receiving love piece.
Oh, yes, because again, with me for so long, when I would put myself, I learned now that I
Mhm.
was putting myself in relationships that was absence of love. It's
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, it's okay if he go cheat and do this and do that, because hey, I don't really love myself anyway. So why would I expect anything different? I don't deserve nothing different. And
Right.
then when he came into my life, it was so foreign to me. I'm like, and it's like, okay, I want to, be there for you and, support you. I'm like, oh, this feels
Mm,
uncomfortable. But
mm,
why does it
mm,
feel uncomfortable, Nikki? Because you're not used to it. No, you're
mm,
right. I'm not used
mm. Yeah, 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 yeah.
to. But when I started allowing, more so allowing it, and that took some years in the beginning, Chris.
Mm,
There's
mhm,
so many times where I broke up with my husband. I was like, oh, well, in my head, I didn't physically tell him, like, oh, no, this just needs to be over. I was finding things. I was
mm,
finding, like, oh, this little thing, no, this just needs to be over. But then later on through my, therapy sessions that I had, I was like, oh my God, I'm so used to not being loved
mm.
that when it shows up, it's like, nope, I'm closing that door.
Yeah, yeah, it could be uncomfortable for sure.
but
Yeah.
now, but now it feels good.
Yeah, yeah, because you're doing the work and you're allowing
Yes.
yourself. Yes, yes, yeah.
So, Chris, tell everyone how they can find you, how they can order your book, connect with you on services.
Yeah, thank you. My website, a roadtriptolove.com, all one word, and then all on social media, Road Trip to Love, as well. So Instagram, Facebook, and my books are available wherever books are sold. Well, my English book is available wherever books are sold in the United States, Amazon, uh, Bookshop, for independent booksellers, for those who
Okay.
want to support independent booksellers. And then my Spanish book also available on Amazon, and it's world Spanish. So
Oh, wow.
yeah,
The
yeah,
good,
yeah.
the Spanish that, yeah. So you got the Spanish Spain, because I know we had to learn two.
Yes.
And then, yeah. So I need to work on my Spanish
Yeah.
period, Nikki.
Duolingo. I
You know,
reckon
I
it's
I was
great.
I was doing that, and it was even sending me the emails like, "Hello, Nikki, we miss you. So thank you again for something
Yeah.
else to help me."
Yeah.
Like, yeah, okay, Duolingo, I'm back.
Duolingo. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it's amazing because my hope is that I can speak to Spanish communities and people. My Spanish publisher wants me to give presentations to
Mm,
bookstores, and so again, sharing the message, because really the message, my book, the title is A Parent's Guide to Changing the Messages from the Playground, is that no matter who
mm.
we are or where we come from, we all play on the same playground.
Yes. Oh, that's a beautiful way to
Yeah.
sum this up. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you
Yes.
so
Thank
much.
you. Thank
Thank
you.
you. And
Thank
I'm gonna drop the links to and different ways to get in contact with Chris, whether it be his social platforms. I know he has a link tree and a link, and I'm gonna put his website on there as well, so you can be able to order books, services, and find him through his social site. Thank you so much,
thank
Chris.
you. Thank you, Nikki. Thank
I
you.
wish you well. Bye
You as
bye.
well. Thank you.
You're welcome.